And French President Emmanuel Macron says the situation in Burkina Faso appears to be calm a day after the military seized power. He condemned the coup and said ousted President Roch Kaboré is in good health and not being threatened. The United Nations has called for the immediate release of Kaboré, who is believed to be held at an army base. His supporters say he survived an assassination attempt.
All right, for more on this, let's turn to Collins Nweke, Global Affairs Analyst based in Belgium. Thank you so much for joining us. It's almost like one has lost count of the number of coups in Burkina Faso. If you were to calculate from independence in 1960 to date, about 9. Why are coups so frequent in Burkina Faso? One, then that jubilation, celebration from the people, what does that portend really for Burkina Faso and, of course, the West African sub-region?
Well, for a start, since this is the first time we are catching up this year, Ngozi and your colleague. Coup has become a recurring decimal, not just in Burkina Faso, but in the West African sub-region. In the last 10 years, I think we've had approximately 43 coup attempts. The majority of it failed, but at least 11 out of these 43 succeeded. For Christ's sake, that's a large, number where the military at some point feels that the democratically elected government is not, living up to their biddings, and so we decide that they need to take over power. And the angle about it that appears a bit concerning is the fact that over the years, and increasingly, we are seeing that the citizens are actually jubilating when a coup takes place, actually supporting the military takeover of power. And what that tells us, of course, is that the people are frustrated with, the so-called democratically elected government. And, they are, really prepared to put their faith experiment with the military. But the sad thing is this, Ngozi, these military officers that seize power, they haven't quite shown that they are better off in terms of governance, in terms of, actually making the life of the people better than the, civilian regime that they actually toppled. So, the bottom line is that as long as poverty continues to get the upper hand in Africa, as long as governance doesn't measure up to purpose, as long as corruption continues to be rife, we will continue in Africa to see coup attempts repeatedly.
This is sounds most unfortunate there, Collins, that it's becoming fashionable to have coups, and you've enumerated some of the reasons why. It's bad governance, poverty, and the rest. But where is the people's power in all of these, rather than resorting to a military takeover, which is considered an aberration where they do not stick to their Republican oath?
Indeed. It is an aberration. And I do not know any sane person that will actually hold his or her head up and tell you that, military takeover of power is the right way. Because it comes with quite a lot of things. Dislocation. It comes with, a number of steps back from democratization. And of course, like I mentioned earlier on, it doesn't even make the life of the people better. But you see, those that are meant to be the victims, that is the citizens, are actually the ones rejoicing that there is a coup attempt. Now, what you get from the sub-regional group, the transnational groups, and the international community is actually the the usual thing: condemnation, show of concern, but as a matter of fact, not very much is done to prevent the coup from taking place in the first place. As a matter of fact, the Western world are actually being accused of having their unseen hands in some of these, military takeover of power, and some of, these vices that actually cause, that lead to the military takeover of power. So it is a virtuous circle, and indeed, as long as the poverty is there, as long as Africans don't learn to govern themselves to be truly independent, it's true but sad that this will continue to happen.
Talk more about the international response to all of this. Like you said, it doesn't seem to be strong enough in a way that can prevent such coups from happening, whether in West Africa or the rest of Africa. What really should we expect from the international community? And what do you make of the reassurance coming from the French President Emmanuel Macron that the ousted leader is good, that he's fine?
Well, it's funny, isn't it, that Macron is actually confident that a fellow president is held somewhere against his will, and he considers him to be in safe hands. Well, I think he should consider switching positions with him. If indeed, it is okay for you to be held somewhere against your will. So that is funny, but that also gives us a little bit of insight into what may be happening behind the scene in terms of the president of France probably knowing more than the rest of us, knows. Because as a matter of fact, I think the right thing to have, for him to have done is simply condemn the coup and let us know what France as, a republic is doing to restore democracy to Burkina Faso. But that wasn't his concentration. And I believe it's, pretty unfortunate. Now, there is probably light at the end of the tunnel, because I understand that, it has become a tradition that ECOWAS currently is negotiating with the coup leaders. And what are we going to get? Most probably the same old story of power sharing arrangements, where the military, is then made to team up with, civilians, and then a transitional government is formed, and all those sort of nonsense. Forgive my language, but you see, this is just too appalling and very, very unfortunate.
Most unfortunate. Finally, this question to you: Nigeria as Africa's big brother, the giant in West Africa, can it intervene in this coup d'etat in Burkina Faso like it did in Sao Tome and Principe under the leadership of President Olusegun Obasanjo, former Nigerian president? Would that be seen as undue interference?
No, it has gone beyond the acronym of undue interference, because, undue interference connotes many things. And of course, it is also within the, main thrust of Nigeria's foreign policy, which is concentratism. That is concentrating on the Africa sub-region while respecting the sovereignty of those nations. But, when exceptional things happen, exceptional solutions have got to be on the table. And so when the military seizes power, it has actually given up the sovereignty of that nation, and it has thrown the door wide open for any form of intervention. So Nigeria, yes, indeed, will be in their rights to intervene, but the sort of intervention I believe that Nigeria should do in this case is stamp his foot very, very firmly on the ground and do not allow neither the ECOWAS or nor the United Nations, African Union to form any sort of alliance, to agree to the formation of any sort of alliance. They should be promptly isolated. I mean, the military leaders, they should refuse any form of collaboration with them, apart from leaving the door open for negotiation to, without any delay, return the government, the democratically elected government, or a transition government of which the coup leaders should have absolutely nothing to do with that, government. That is the only way that, military officers elsewhere in the continent would have the clear message that you cannot topple a democratically elected government and then be compensated by being allowed to rule in that country. So that is a disincentive, and Nigeria should lead the way in making that happen through ECOWAS and the African Union.
Superbly put, well said and stated. Great submission. Collins Nweke, Global Affairs Analyst, spoke with us from Brussels in Belgium.